Everyone, welcome back to my channel, Analisa Academia, and I can't believe 2024 is almost over. I'm recording this on December 29th, and I can't believe the end of the year is just a few days away. It's been a crazy year, all good things, some weird things, but I'm excited to see what 2025 brings. So for today's video, I thought I would talk about my top 5 reads of 2024. I'm a huge reader. I have loved reading since I was a little girl. My mom actually helped me learn how to read when I was 2 years old. She's a reading specialist in an elementary school, and so this is something she's super passionate about and that she passed on to me. So I read a total of 41 books. I'm almost done with number 42. For 2024, which is super exciting. That's the most books I've ever read in a year, and this year I really discovered my love of reading again, and so it's been a really good year for reading. Super hard to narrow it down to my top 5, but I think that these books not only help me kind of get out of a reading slump I'd been in for a few years, but to also kind of explore and see different genres. I really got into more mystery thriller books in the past year. And so that was super exciting and kind of exploring different authors that I hadn't read before. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on my top 5 books of 2024. Some of these books I don't own still. I might have sold them to a secondhand bookstore, or I got them from the library. So I will put a picture up on the screen and link them down below in case you're curious about what they look like, or if you want to check them out for yourselves. Highly encourage supporting your local library. Mine, thankfully, is like 5 minutes down the road. So I frequent it quite often, either with physical books, and I also use them on my Kindle. Sometimes I can't get to the library, but I can download them. So really great system. I highly recommend using your local library. The first book, my 5th book on the list, is The Teacher by Frida McFadden. And this is the first book I've read of hers. I read a couple of her other ones. The Housemaid is super popular, but this one was my favorite of hers by far. And I put it on the list because it helped me discover a new author. My mother-in-law actually picked this up and read it and told me I needed to read it. It has have trigger warnings. It does deal with some topics that might not be good for some people to read about. So please check them before you pick up this book. But I read this book in one sitting. It was so intense. It was fast paced. The ending for me came out of nowhere. It was fabulous. And I love having books that just so engross you that you just have to sit down and read them in a single sitting. And so, yeah, that's why I chose to put this on number 5. I've read a few others, like I said. This one is still my favorite of hers, and we have a whole stack of them at the house. My mother-in-law and my fiance, we all read her books, and so it's kind of fun to cycle through and share what we think and what's our favorite Frida McFadden books. Highly recommend checking her out if you haven't already. Just make sure to check those trigger warnings because the books are sometimes dealing with really sensitive topics, and I wouldn't want anybody to get triggered by them. The next book on my list is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I loved this book. I haven't read any of her other books. I know that Babel is really popular. I actually own it. It's just been sitting in my TBR pile because it's a thick one. And I just didn't feel like I had the time to commit to such a large book this year. So it's just sitting in my TBR next to my bed, waiting to be read. But Yellowface, it was so interesting to me. It's very different than her other books, which have more of a fantasy element to it. This was about an author who is accused of stealing a manuscript of a friend who is of Asian descent. The author is not, and her publishing house makes kind of a strategic, not so great move to depict her as racially ambiguous and the fallout from all of that. And as someone who is just starting to understand her identity as someone with Asian descent, my mom's side of the family is Japanese. It was a really interesting depiction of cultural appropriation and the cutthroat world of publishing, and what would one person do to make sure that they were able to make their dreams come true as an author, and how it kind of all spirals out of control. I thought it was super interesting, very well written. I read it in just a couple of days because I was really into the main character in a way that I hadn't been into a main character before, where you almost hate her, but you sympathize with her. And I thought that the way that the author was able to have those weird feelings come up for the reader about the main character was a new take, and I loved that. I thought that it kept the story really interesting, and you were rooting for her and you were rooting for against her at the same time, and I loved that. So definitely why it is on my top 5 list for this. The third book on my list is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I'm super late to the game on this one, and I know I am. It was published like over 10 years ago. I've always been into Greek mythology. I don't know why it took me so long to read this book. It just did. But so many people, so many friends and people online have been pestering me to read it, so I finally gave in and read it. And talk about an emotional roller coaster. It tells the story of Achilles and the Iliad from the perspective of Patroclus, who, for some historians, is ambiguously in Achilles' life. But from what the author explained in their author notes, and then some readings that I've done on my own, just because I love this period of history, I don't see it as anything other than a romantic relationship, a romantic partnership. I think that it is very clear. And I love that Miller explored this in a way that not only told the story of the Iliad from a new perspective, but just the depths of emotional, romantic feeling. It killed me. Be prepared to cry at the end of this book if you do read it. It broke my heart, but yeah, it was so beautiful. And I just sobbed after I closed it, after I finished it. And it the way it tells mythology, I thought, was beautiful. The way that the gods and the story are intertwined with one another makes you believe in the mythology, and really makes you remember why the Iliad is stuck with us for all of these centuries, these thousands of years, is because it's such a beautiful story and horrific story in some parts of human struggle and human passion and war and hate and love. And Miller is able to capture all of those elements that have become so famous with the Iliad and the Odyssey, but put a new spin on it with that romantic element between Achilles and Patroclus. And I I don't have enough good things to say about just the way the relationship developed and how truly emotional it was, and how the reader could feel that. And I think that is what makes a great story, is when the reader can understand the emotions of the characters within the book. So highly recommend, especially if you love Greek mythology. If you are interested, I know they're making a new Iliad movie that was just announced by Christopher Nolan. So I have a feeling this book will pop off again in popularity, even though it's already super popular, because of the story coming back into kind of popular culture. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that movie, but definitely check this book out if you love Greek mythology, because you will not be disappointed. On my list is The Examiner by Janice Hallett, and this is a new author to me this year, just like Frida McFadden was. And holy cow, her books are written really weirdly, like not like standardized fiction. Instead, they are written like as clips from text messages, emails, instant messaging, observations, journal entries. They're really weird if you're not used to that kind of flow. But I feel like once you get into it, uh, it's addicting. I love books like this. I've read a few other authors who have done their books like this, but she really takes the genre to a whole new level. So this is a thriller about a group of art students at an inaugural master's program that combines art with business, and they have to um, basically come up with a business proposal for an exhibition that partners with the local business. And there's a lot of backstabbing and mystery and murder, and the examiner is the one that's trying to unravel this whole mystery, reading through the logs of the learning management system that the group uses for instant messaging. And then there's some text messages and emails. It was so fast paced. This is another book I finished in just a couple of settings. It's a little bit thick, so I had to take breaks. But my partner actually read it first. He got it from the library and then knew that I had to read it because we had read her other book together. And I'm so glad that he introduced me to this author. I have her other book, The Appeal. It's on my TBR on my desk next to me. And I'm excited to read that because her works move so quickly. You have to be prepared to just be sucked into them, and you can't take a break, it feels like, because you have to know what happens next. There was a couple times I was reading this that it was really late, and my partner made me go to bed because he knew I would be cranky in the morning, but I did not want to stop reading this. The characters are just, they're so likable in some parts and they're so hateable in others. And I think that three-dimensionality of not just a flat character, but someone that you can really understand that could be a real person, it just takes you back. And there are some twists at the end that made me want to throw the book against the wall. Like, how did I not see this coming? You get so involved in the big picture that you forget about the characters in the small picture. It is so great. So I highly recommend that if you are looking for a good mystery thriller, if you are really into books that are like crime scene based and crime, like if you like CSI when you were growing up like I did, it's fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. All right, so now it's time for my number one book of 2024. I actually just read this a couple months ago. It just came out a couple months ago. It's called By Any Other Name, by Jodi Picoult. And this book took my breath away. I've actually never read any of her books, which makes me feel silly because she's super popular. And I know my mom and my mother-in-law love her books as well. So maybe I'll have to start reading them after this one. So this book follows two women, and they are separated by many generations, but they are related. Amelia Bassano and then her descendant. And Amelia lived during the time of Shakespeare, and her descendant is also a playwright. And it follows their trajectories and how women are traditionally been excluded from things like the arts, from politics, and how that still resonates today, even though Amelia lived in the 16th and 17th centuries. And this book, as someone who has been passionate about history, passionate about women's rights and feminism and making my own way in the world, it broke me in the best possible way. It made me think so much about my identity as a woman, my identity as a woman who wants to break into academia, my identity as a woman in the world itself. And thinking about, I don't know much about my ancestors. Nobody in my family's really gone back and done genealogy that much, but thinking about like if I had any woman in my family that did the things that Amelia Bassano did and made a name for herself just trying to survive in the harsh realities of our world. And Picoult created characters that just leapt off the page. She brought in Christopher Marlowe and William Shakespeare and Queen Elizabeth, and um, they became people. And that is really hard to do with these figures, especially ones like Shakespeare that are larger than life, that seem almost mythological. And instead, they became actual people. And I was just, oh, there's romance and there are some scenes of domestic violence. So, trigger warning for that if that's something that upsets you. They are very brief, but they were upsetting. You know, they made me sad. And so, if that's something that you deal with, please be cautious. But just feeling the character's strength and how much they worked to make their lives better made me proud to be a woman. And even if I'm not descended by anybody famous or great, just knowing that generations of women that came before me trying to make the world a better place for women and for others, it made me really emotional. I cried. Another book I cried at after I finished it, just because it was heavy but yet powerful, and I can't recommend it enough. I literally told everybody that I knew, please read this book. I know it's a history book. I'm the history nerd, but like when I tell you that this book changed my perspective on history and changed my perspective on my accomplishments, like I'm not exaggerating. It is so worthy of being my number one book of the year. And I hope that it wins all of the awards because it truly was a life-changing book. And that is what I love about reading. So there you have it, my top 5 books of 2024. I appreciate you sitting through this video and seeing what books I have been reading throughout the year. I'm super duper excited to see what 2025 brings. I've already got a whole bunch of books, too many books in my house that I need to read and maybe I need to stop buying, but I doubt that's going to happen soon. Again, thank you so much for watching. I apologize if the audio is a little weird. I had to use headphones because my partner is playing the new video game I got him for Christmas. So I appreciate you watching this video, and I can't wait to see what 2025 brings us.